And now, Mr. Serling.
One of next week's stars is alongside me now. She'll appear in a most unusual tale called The Lonely. It's a story that takes place on
an asteroid, and it's a most intriguing premise.
It sounds it. Next week on the Twilight Zone, Jack Warden, John Daner, and Jean Marsh appear in a bizarre tale of a man and a woman. I don't understand it either. Thank you and good night.
Hey guys, we're gonna.
Yeah, I kind of love the way they play that. That's fun. That's fun.
Well, it is called a teaser, so.
Yeah. I like how kind
Honestly, that's better than most teasers nowadays, where it's like they just show you half the plot of the episode. Like that's just like, I don't know. They play that very well. Like that's fun. That's cute. I like that.
I think it's. I like how kind of like good-natured he is. He just seemed. I don't know nothing about Rod Serling. He could be a piece of shit for all I know. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't look him up just to keep the innocence there. But kind of feels like he's kind of just like, hey, I'm just gonna play around with you. We got this fun story. Let's get into it. Hey.
I'm going to show you some fucked up shit, and you're going to have a great time.
Hey.
I haven't read too much about him. I think he's kind of like Gene Roddenberry,
okay,
but without all the sexual stuff. Like I haven't read too much, so I could be wrong.
So if Gene Roddenberry is mirror Rod Serling, got it.
Yeah, basically.
All right, so we're going to give pre-ratings?
Yeah, based off that, what would you pre-rate? Let's start with Dan. What would you pre-rate this just as an episode of television?
So what I'm expecting after watching that is a little bit of humor, which would be welcome. Any show that takes itself too seriously, may not be fit for network TV broadcast. I think Serling is affable, even though I know he won't be featuring in the episode. It sets a great tone. I would tune in for this half hour of TV, and I'd probably pre-rate, not knowing much else about it, at an 8.
So yeah, this is going to be my literal first episode of Twilight Zone ever. I've seen various clips, I've seen all the famous cultural references. I know nothing about the show really and how it actually plays out. There's something a little bit Hitchcockian about the way that all played out. Like I could see Hitchcock doing the exact same shtick in front of one of his movies.
Just you wait.
I enjoy that shtick. It's a fun shtick, although I imagine Serling was also less of a piece of shit than Hitchcock. I'm expecting something a little bit twisted, a little bit weird, a little bit off-kilter. It's got a sense of humor, but it's probably gonna be dark humor. I'm expecting maybe a bit of misogyny just because of the time period and also like the way, but not. You know what? I'll say this: I am expecting less misogyny than I would expect from an average episode of TOS.
It's a safe bet there'll be misogyny. Yeah.
Yeah. Guess what? I like a safe bet. But judged based off of that, I'm going to assume this is going to be an episode of like Twilight television I would enjoy. I'll give it like a 7.5 pre-rating.
Higher tier.
Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, we agreed on this beforehand. Since this is a different show, different format, we're going to let Idle and Dan pick the rating, the what out of what at the end of these.
I did not know this. Interesting. Okay.
So
I'll think up some.
All right, Idle, what's your gut instinct?
I think I'm intrigued. I am curious about what's to offer. So we'll know why the woman's made up. Well, assume plastic woman, kind of Auton, kind of Doctor Who's kind of thing. You've picked it. You've picked this episode for us, Auto. So that automatically puts it a bump. So you've enjoyed this much to recommend it to us. So I think I'll
no
go...
meta rating.
Yeah, I'm gaming the system. I'll go with stars. I'll also give it a 7.5. I'm on the optimistic scale. I'm curious. I'm hoping it'll go up.
Okay, I don't think I should pre-rate because I've watched all these kind of recently. Yeah,
you know what this is all about.
Let's dive into it.
Let's go watch the episode.
Let's go into the Twilight Zone.
Cue titles.
This is the dimension of imagination. It is an area which we call the Twilight Zone.
Okay, welcome everybody. We have just watched the Twilight Zone's 7th episode, The Lonely. Auto, you've brought us here to watch Twilight Zone episodes, something different from our usual Star Trek fare. Please, what brought you to this decision? Why this episode first?
So, Twilight Zone is a cult classic, right? Everyone is aware of it on some level. Maybe you've seen clips, maybe you just know characters. They get referenced to hell and back in other shows. I was going through the behind the scenes on one of the episodes we'll watch later, and there's actually like a Futurama where they do a big long scene parodying it. So yeah, everyone's aware of it on some level, and I've seen a lot of the classics, but I realized recently I hadn't seen them all. So I went back, watched them all through, and uh, I forget the exact point, but at some point I'm watching, I'm like, you know what? I want to review these. I want to talk about these. Rod Serling does a good job of putting together fantasy and sci-fi in a way that I think is actually a lot less tacky than early Star Trek, which is what kind of brought us all together. So I thought, let's review the best of the best of these and see how we like it. And maybe we can start branching out into other shows and stuff. So when I saw this episode, I thought, okay, this is going to be the intro, the crossover, because this plot, sci-fi as it is, could fit, I think, into any Star Trek series, and ask the viewer the same questions that it does in Twilight Zone.
Yeah, and just to throw back a little bit, this is sort of my first experience with Rod Serling. I've not watched any Twilight Zone. He's sort of like, we watched that little pre-teaser, which we saw at the beginning there. And sort of like, I like the idea of someone leading us through these different stories, and just going from our sort of Star Trek perspective, and imagine if Gene Roddenberry introduced every episode and go, this is a story as tale as old as time. I mean, obviously maybe with a bit more of a positive impact, but I'm kind of liking. I kind of get why all these shows sort of pay this much of an homage to Rod Serling, especially like Futurama do it a lot, with the scary door and a lot of other sort of vague references here and there. So it's cool. I like the Rod Serling aspect to it.
Well, it helps build that anthology tone. Like you can see why so many scary stories to tell in the dark and all that, Tales from the Crypt, all that kind of stuff.
It does feel like you're around the campfire. We're around the campfire. We're sharing scary stories together. It's that kind of atmosphere. I kind of like that.
Yeah, and it's like, guess what? Like, you can always take take the mick of that kind of stuff, because it is very easy for it to become very hokey, very stupid, because half the time the stories aren't any good. But then there's those moments where you get drawn in, and then suddenly, oh wait, shit, yeah, now I'm in there. Now I'm invested in the scary story, and guess what? This is a fucking good story.
This is a good story.
So this comes across in the short format too, has to be spoken to. We're used to watching 50-minute long form TV programs, and in the style of the day, they were all serials were an hour long. You've got your bonanzas and your shows that try to tell a story, and there's sometimes a lot of padding. And in this case, now they've taken what amounts to just a treatment, right? These are very very straightforward ideas, and what they've done is they've assembled direction and cinematography and talent that really fleshes it out and gives it life. And so sci-fi of the day was primarily written. You would subscribe to digests and newsletters that would give you really short Arthur C. Clarke stories and things that would come by mail. And so every bit of the fantasy and the science fiction was in your mind. You would create the pictures along with your stories. And so Rod Serling taking these ideas that flourished for decades and bringing them to the screen is really novel, and it's interesting to kind of see what they're doing with it, and what a great introduction that we have here in The Lonely.
Just to give a little bit of context as well, this was actually, and I think Otto mentioned it, this was the second episode that was filmed after the pilot, and one of the first stories that Rod Serling brought to the sponsors to sort of say, hey, buy my series. I think this kind of does feel like an interesting sort of opener, and I like, for how dated this is, like 1959, I don't think it felt dated, like in terms of how they set it and how almost bottle episode they set it. We're on an asteroid in, I think you put in the notes here, 2046 or something like that, the distant future in the 1950s. And one thing I do love in sort of like old television is how they depict like the in something that's going to happen in like 25 years. We found an asteroid with fully breathable air and we can just exist on it, and we still have these classic cars, and the rockets coming down. I love kind of what games like Fallout like almost tease as sort of like retro futuristic. I kind of like the vibe. It's come round again to something like, it doesn't feel hokey. It feels kind of almost comforting in a way.
Classic.
Yeah, classic. Yeah.
I actually had to take umbrage with the term you used there. You said the word bottle episode, and I feel like that's very much not appropriate. Because the term bottle episode refers to, say, like a show with an established setting where nothing but established sets is
you're
used.
right. I think the
for a sparse character-filled episode.
Yeah.
What this reminds me of is a stage play. This is a play.
Yeah.
This is absolutely a play with a very limited amount of performers. You could even see a case of, if you were doing this with maybe you could get away with 3 people, maybe 4. Like if you wanted to have just one of the additional crew on the spaceship. and it is very sparse. You can imagine all the directions being written down on the thing. It'd be maybe 30 pages, if that, with very sparse screen direction. You wouldn't need to do much to make a set. It is focused purely on your principal performers and the drama. So it's a stage play. Like, I feel like by bottle episode doesn't quite articulate what the actual feel is here, I think.
So at the end of each episode, Serling comes on and gives you a little teaser, like you saw at the beginning of this video, for next week's episode. And it's funny you say stage play. That's what it is. And lots of times they'll just reference that. He says, next week you'll see this, and the players are this on the stage of this. So they don't shy away from it, but they trust the story and the actors to draw you in. Like, you go in knowing what the format's going to be, and then they trust the actors and the story to draw your attention away from that. Before we go further, I did have a couple pieces of trivia. We don't have a memory alpha to pull from, a giant Wikipedia index of info, but I did try to get a little bit for every episode. So, episode director Jack Smite, discussing filming on the location in Death Valley, recalled that it was, quote, unbelievably hot. The temperature was around 130 degrees, and the intensity of the heat stroke worsened after the caterer served a, quote, very heavy meal in the heat to the actors. God.
Why would you even?
This caused several crew members to faint, including director of photography George T. Clemens, who collapsed from a camera crane due to exhaustion. Clemens later said that the sweat of the cast and crew would evaporate almost immediately in the dry air. Because of this, the sweat seen in the show is actually glycerin.
Oh my God! Wow! Let's go to Death Valley with a load of glycerin. What could go wrong?
130 degrees.
That's a great time. Like, what the fuck, guys?
I wonder if they had to refilm Jean Marsh's scene where she cries on a soundstage because of that too. Because when she turns her face, she already has tears streaming down. Or it could be glycerin tears, which are common. So,
yeah.
Not to discredit the actress.
Just briefly recap the plot for those that haven't watched it recently. We encounter our James Corey.
Go watch the episode, guys.
Go watch the episode, but we encounter, in a nutshell.
Is this public domain? Can you watch this anywhere, or is this on a particular streaming service?
Not yet.
Not for a few years yet. I think another 20 odd years. I think, but
it's gonna. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but yeah. No, this is
Paramount Plus. Well, several platforms have it. Paramount Plus does. So if you're a Star Trek fan, you should be able to access it there as well.
It is. It's also available on a lot of free streaming services. The old TV, while it still is under copyright, is also extremely cheap, and there are some entire free channels devoted to these in other older series.
Pluto TV even has like a Twilight Zone channel or something like that. Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah.
But anyway, we follow James Corey, who, fun fact, the James S.A. Corey wrote the Expanse novels, but not related apparently. James Corey was a convicted murderer, whether it be in homicide or manslaughter, we're never quite sure. It's currently sentenced there for however many years, 60 odd years or however long it is. And keeps getting routine deliveries from his friend and a couple of antagonists. And is delivered a very strange parcel, which turns out to be an android woman who he initially dismisses, but then falls head over heels in love with. But then on a return journey 11 months later, the crew come back and say, hey, you've been pardoned. We've got room for you and just you. And then it turns out he's got no room for Alicia, the robot he's fallen in love. The robot. Robot. He's fallen in love with. And what was his name? Allenby.
Allenby.
The sympathetic friend shoots her in the face, and then they disappear off into the sky, and he is not so lonely, and all the.
All right,
yeah, go on.
Let me back up first. You mentioned that it was kind of actually a big reveal. We don't know what's in the box. Even the other crew members don't know what's in the box. Only Allenby does. So he lifts the lid. Corey lifts the lid. He goes, what the? And we get this stinger. And so what did you guys think was going to be in that box?
The spoiler did it for me, knowing that there was a mannequin next to Rod Serling. I understood. Also, I think your selection of this when trying to think not only of modern day with AI companions becoming more and more common, but also so much of what we love on Star Trek being Commander Data and other simulacrums. I kind of knew it was in the box. How about you guys?
I kind of intimated that as well, because I was like, mannequin woman, it's like, okay, in the 1950s or 60s that means robot. That's exactly what that means.
I completely forgot. I watched the teaser and then immediately forgot all about it. When the box came up, I was just like, I don't know what's in there. Is it a part for his car? What? What's going on?
You're like the best audience idol. Like,
this is great.
You're constantly astonished by everything that happens on screen.
So everything's so rewatchable. It's great. I wonder if Frodo will take the.
So you know what? Can I dive straight in on something which I think is because there's a lot going on in this episode. Like, for
why did they
25
send
minutes,
her a
they
woman?
fit a
Send him
lot
a
of
woman?
like. Well, I think you can understand why. There's a lot of things that this touches on that I really appreciate. And one of the things that I love, because it ties back to actually Gothic literature, is the idea of the uncanny and the uncanny valley. Now, we know that best as like a reference to to robots, androids. Like, if you have a look at like what human-like robots are like nowadays, you can look at them and you know instantly that they're wrong because they have like bad synthetic skin or their eyes don't move the right way. It's really, really obvious, and that's what you have is a degree of humans don't like it when things look too similar to themselves, but a few shades wrong. Because humans are so used to looking at other humans that they know what to look for, like the little micro cues that tell you. So they like it when either robots are like indistinguishable, but like obviously that opens up a whole other type of fear. Or they like it when robots are really, 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 really obviously robot. And they touch on that very, very strongly there when he mentions like, why didn't they make you out of electrodes and all that kind of bullshit. But I love it because the Uncanny Valley has its roots in Gothic literature as something that is both attractive and something to be afraid of. Like monsters like the vampires and werewolves and like Dracula, for example, is meant to be an antecedent of Gothic of the Uncanny Valley, and we've kind of adapted for modern era to be more of a mechanistic kind of like genre. But I really appreciate how this drew on that and how they used that to create like a sense of unreality for Corey, because the way that Alicia is around just Corey is very different to the way she is around when other people are around. Like that one scene at the end where she's just robot-like was what the subtitles said. It's like robot-like. It's like, well, because his perception is so warped that like he can't see it any other way.
That's what I was kind of thinking they were going to do. I thought this was kind of like the big twist was going to be like either she didn't exist and there was something else in the box, or the fact that she was acting like human because he was so lonely he couldn't imagine anything else. He finally broke and he was just talking to a machine as if it was lovely. And I thought that the twist was going to be they were going to come down to the planet and just see a hunk of metal where he's seeing a woman, in true man trap style. It can be whatever the person of desire sees.
We don't get a lot of answers, and so this one of the expertly done things about this episode is playing with the negative space, leaving it open to interpretation. And this episode is nothing but negative space, right? I mean, you talk about the Uncanny Valley; it's literally set in Death Valley, and and the fact that Corey and the Quarry is a blank slate. We don't know what he's done. We never find out.
Sounds like a sitcom, dude. Corey and the Quarry.
But we never find out. We know that he was pardoned, but he wasn't exonerated. We don't know. Certainly, at the end, we understand that the robot exists. So it's not like the episode "Hard Time," where O'Brien, kills his cellmate, and it finds out it was a fantasy, but still, he took that action. So we don't know, whether or not he's actually a murderer, and what he would have eventually done to the woman or to anybody else that tried to get him off of this asteroid.
Because that was called into question. They said, he sentenced there for homicide, but even like with two lines, like I didn't do it. It was manslaughter. I did it in self-defense. Even that's never addressed, but it's.
Allenby seems to agree with him. He's like, I know the story, so. But
it automatically paints him
in a. Just Corey.
Yeah, it automatically puts. I think it's clever because it puts him into a more sympathetic light. Because if they said he's been there for homicide, like no one's going to relate to this character because they'd be like, oh well, he's just a murderer. He deserves to be there. Why should we feel anything? But if you add in that little seed of like, well, if he did it in self-defense, that's then this guy's acting sympathetic. It's a very clever way of sort of allowing us to relate.
Well, because he also. Yeah, like Dan said with the negative space, there is so much care taken in the details they don't tell you. Like, okay, who is his victim? Why? Why was it self-defense? Was it a woman? Because that would have very much colored his interactions with Alicia and the moments of kind of minor violence that he has with her. You would have looked at that very differently if it hadn't been codified as self-defense. But they do go out of their way not to tell you any more details about the victim or the actual crime.
So that's a good point.
That it's apparently,
Good. I was going to say that's a great point because all we're seeing is Corey's point of view, and he may be an unreliable narrator. The only thing we know is that for sure is that he's sentenced to a crime that was either dangerous or violent enough that he had to be removed from society entirely onto an asteroid, hundreds of millions of miles away.
And that's notorious enough that people know about it. That these random three guys, like I imagine you'd probably you're bored on a spacecraft, you probably would look up the people you're picking up. But even still, there's an implication that it was some kind of notorious, maybe for how violent it was.
So yeah, Allenby's relationship is a little bit more of that negative space where I think Star said it seems like there's a history there. It does. Their interactions, and they set that obviously in stark contrast to the other two crew members mocking him basically for the whole first 10, 15 minutes. But Allenby has a sympathy for him to the point where he brings him Alicia. So you don't know what's going on there, but their interaction lends credence to the self-defense thing. It makes you a little bit more sympathetic for Corey because Allenby is sympathetic for Corey. I wanted to dial back, and actually we'll get to this in a minute, I'm sure, but there's also end of 1959, there's a technophobia in the air that we don't have nowadays. I was just watching today. Yeah, I was watching today the TOS episode Ultimate Computer, where the M5 supercomputer is tasked to take over the control of the starship. And the big theme of that episode is computers could never do what great men can do, what humanity can do. You need a human leader. And so, yeah, that of the era is different. At the end where Allenby whips out his pistol, shoots her in the face, and I was watching your guys' reaction. You were all a little bit taken aback. You're like, whoa, it's a violent thing. But for him, and then quite abruptly for Corey as well, they're like, oh, it was just a machine. You're right. I should remember that. So, our interactions with data over the years, among other AI, has taught us a little bit more care and compassion with that form of life. And back then, there was not that. There was more of a phobia, I think, about it.
Yeah, I think
that there is definitely. Oh, no, you go.
Yeah, Lost in Space didn't come out until 5 years later, where we had a main cast member in Robbie the Robot being friendly to the Swiss Family Robinson. So yeah, I think that so certainly across the pond a few years later, we've got Robophobia with the Daleks too when Doctor Who premiered, and so yeah, I agree that this and that was an interesting turn also to give this particular robot feelings where I think. Largely robots had been something to be feared and weapons, and really their menace came in their complete absence of emotion, and now and it's almost a kind of a minor point to the story that Alicia actually is a robot. It could have been an actual companion, or even it could have been an imaginary friend. So I think one of you mentioned that maybe there was nothing in the box at all. We know that it is a robot, and we know that Allenby did bring this to him because those events unfold where everybody's together at the end. But yeah, there's a lot of questions that remain as far as what we the audience are supposed to think of Alicia. So we sympathize with her because she can hurt. And she shows that very effectively in a short time. What do you got?
I feel like we're going to get that a lot with the Twilight Zone. There's going to be a lot of these just questions, because I feel like that's the kind of thing it's kind of trying to do. It's kind of getting you asking these questions and thinking about these different topics, like why this, why that, and exploring it in more detail in yourself, rather than the episode just going all out and saying, "Hey, this is why this happened."
Yeah, it's one of those interesting things where, like, you mentioned that robophobia and the Luddite movement. And it's like, yeah, that's absolutely like part of the subtext, but it's also a case of that last line of it, I should remember that, is the way that the actor delivers that is very intentional. It's not a case of, oh yeah, no, you're right. It's a case of, yeah, I should remember that, because he's questioning the feelings he had for her, but he's also questioning, yeah, she was a robot, but are my feelings still valid? And then I also find it really interesting that the narration says, she was made in his image, so it kind of calls into question how much of her emotionality and how much of her her human quality is based just on his perception, like I was mentioning, with like the kind of abnormal perception he's got going on when he's just on his own. Because like the way she is in that kind of like stargazing scene is completely different to the way that she acts when the other people are around. So
I am
there's a lot
here too, sir.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like in case if you have to kind of, like you say, with the negative space, like was he just imagining her becoming more and more human because it was like he was so desperate? or did she like respond more towards him? Like, her programming was such that she became tailored to him, and it didn't have work the same with the other people. I feel like it's almost more sympathetic to the robot because it's a case of like the robot didn't do anything wrong. The robot literally just exists and has all of these desires placed upon it as an object of desire. Kind of like a victim in like a gothic novel. I keep on bringing that up, but I feel like it's appropriate for this kind of setup. Where it's a case of like it's almost more about asking the questions of the person transferring the desires rather than the object. Like it's just an innocent. It didn't ask for any of this to happen to it.
A fantastic point, Star. So let's go a little bit further too. So is Allenby now a murderer? If this robot is as it says on the tin, is he a murderer? Does he take and pardon and bring Corey off of the asteroid by committing the very thing that brought him there in the
framing of the in the framing of the episode? Like, she's shipped there as a product. She is, assembled, has a service manual and everything. From Allenby's perspective, yeah, I know. Okay, 1950s misogyny going on here, but in Allenby's mind, he says, "Oh, she's just the robot." Okay, that's fine. This is some quick way. We've got we got 5 minutes. We got to get off here, shoot the robot. Let's go. He's kind of get the impression he's very pragmatic. We'll deal with the emotions later, which you don't have because you're a 1950s man, and you just get on the robot. Let's go.
So there's
a very. Oh no, here you go.
No, you've been saying that all episode, so now it's your turn, Star.
So it's very, very purposeful the way that Allenby dispatches her. Is he shoots her in the face. He shoots her in the part that will dispel the illusion most violently, and most abruptly, and most effectively, because they're on a time crunch. But it's also a case of like, exactly, you have to break the illusion. You have to you kill the freaking mermaid so that the siren's call goes away. And there's a degree of like almost putting a dog down of like, guess what? I have to do this for your own good. Like, this is not the existence you want. If I can see Allenby is thinking like 5 minutes ahead. Like, what is Corey gonna do in 5 minutes if I don't stop this right now and remind him what that is? And it's a case of like that adds another emotional dimension to it, where it's like, yeah, is Allenby a murderer? But if you tried to bring that to trial, it's a case of like, look, man, this was a psychologically unstable, tortured, innocent man who was, I tried to do something for him in my sympathy. It backfired horribly because your justice system sucks. Which, by the way, I like that this is all a very subtle critique of certain forms of. It's not even the main thrust of the episode, but it's still there as a subtext. Of guess what? Sometimes fucking prison systems and prison sentences are completely fucking wrong, and you cannot. This is why, arguably, an argument against a death sentence as well.
There's no robots' rights yet. The Picard versus Maddox doesn't happen until the 21st century.
Yeah, so. No, we haven't got that, and you haven't got that precedent.
We're well into. Are we in the three laws territory here? This is like Asimov's peak era for fiction.
I think Asimov would have been around by now.
This is. I mean, I wrote the complete robot. Let me look up. But we're definitely within the kind of.
I'm looking at the date now.
Let's give Automaton 2000 a chance to talk about. Let's give Automaton 2000 a chance to talk about the automaton in the year 2000 from this episode.
So there's this phrase, "for all intents and purposes," and in a lot of cases you use that with the subtext of "do all the parts work?" Like, can I fuck it? Is basically the question. But that's not the question in this case. For all intents and purposes, she is a woman, and they show that right off the bat with the tears
and emotional
and the reacting to the emotion. So to answer your question, Idle, is Allenby a murderer? Yeah. And if he had shot the dog instead of the robot, he would still be a murderer. And then that's not really the question. The question is it justified for the situation and this and that? So for the era, I don't think they would consider that a murder because it is a robot. But, we're watching it with hindsight. Our sensibilities have changed. I say he's a murderer. And does that really matter in the crux of the story? No. That's just, a plot device to wrap it up.
Yeah, so guess what? I'm going to leap ahead of you all, and I'm going to say that my bread of the episode is robot.
Okay.
Because I want to talk
we've got
about...
sound deck.
We have a thing for this. We have a thing. This is brand new.
Oh, do we?
We do have our new section, a new thing we're going to do for these new episodes. Welcome to... Bread. Auto, what is bread?
I don't think that came through to us, so you might.
I didn't hear that. Yeah.
Okay, let me think.
I hope it worked. Yeah. So yeah, my. Well, you need to introduce what the segment is, surely.
Auto, this is your segment.
I thought Idle just did. Yeah. Again, because we're coming from Star Trek, There's an episode where they're phasic. They start saying random words. Cisco goes bread, and it doesn't
That's all
mean
we can talk
anything.
about.
And it comes at like the last 3 minutes of the show, but it's all we could talk about because it's stuck in our mind. So the bread of the episode is what will stick in your mind when you think about this episode. What moment, what image, what character you just won't be able to get out of your head. What sums up the episode? So Stars, go ahead.
Yeah, so for me, it's the word robot, and it's because I want to talk about the word robot, which has like it's one of those like things that you don't even question being part of like the popular lexicon, but especially back then, that was not a common word, and that's why it's said so weirdly here. Like, I looked it up instantly. iRobot was written in 1950, so that's only 9 years old by this point.
Yeah.
Lords of
The
Robotics
actual-
are a very new concept.
The actual three laws. Again, I was also looking this up, and the actual three laws of robotics was in a short story published in 1942. So, yeah, we've got
Okay, fair
we've
enough.
got some
Even
history.
a
on this.
little bit earlier, but
Yeah,
yeah.
same. We're in that era.
See, yeah, exactly. It's still very new territory. And it's like you'd have to be a fucking hard sci-fi buff. Like, we're talking about Star Trek. You would have to be someone who would read Benny Russell's stories or whoever O'Brien's character was in Far Beyond the Stars to really understand this stuff. Whereas this is more about reaching the common man and explaining these concepts. Right? 1959 is still quite early for that. And I love the word robot because I think it comes from the word like servant or like essentially slave. I think it's a Czech word for robota, I believe. And it's one of those words that you don't even really question the origin of it and the actual meaning of it because it's become such a catch-all term for anything that is vaguely human-shaped or capable of movement and like automative tasks, some kind of automaton, perhaps. But here it means a very specific thing of a mechanistic device designed to serve man in whatever function it's designed for. It is explicitly a service machine. And it's like, you mentioned do all the parts work, but it's an emotional service, I feel like, in the context of this story. The physical dimension isn't really important, and I feel like it would kind of demean the story to really dive into that. But yeah, like
They
that's
didn't
the kind of thing
Roddenberry it. Yeah.
They didn't Roddenberry it, yeah. Let's Roddenberry the lead on that. No, yeah, thank you. I'm glad someone got that. In fact, I'm sure you all got it. You're all just like too polite, and you just didn't want me to give it any.
No, but you are now
room to
required
marinate.
every time we do a
job,
Star
Stars.
Trek review, and you need to bury the lead. You have to Roddenberry the lead now.
Yeah, you have to Roddenberry the lead.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's
so
a new
yeah, for me,
segment, we
it's-
got it.
But yeah, it's Rubik because it's like it's such a reminder of the time, but it's also a case of if you know the historical context of that word, it throws the story into a very different light, and I like that aspect of it. So that's my pick.
Dan, give me some
all right.
bread.
My bread is that checkerboard. What an iconic focal point, and they bring it out twice. The first time they bring out the checkerboard is when he is anticipating Allenby's arrival, and he's got it all set up. He's ready to play. It looks like it was a game in progress that got interrupted, so that shows us that whenever these visits come, they're very short. And I think it's fantastic the amount of actual science in the science fiction where they're talking about launch windows and weight limits
Yeah.
for the payload. They really did a fantastic job. Mercury missions, NASA's first missions, only started a year prior to this episode airing. So all of this was very fresh and new to the American consciousness. So the fact that they seem to want to incorporate that to the episode and use that not only as a point of fact, but also something that moves the episode along, that keeps the plot moving, was really well done. But that checkerboard not only displays just how little time he has to interact with another human being, but also something we noticed as we were watching, that it's not just nuts and bolts, it's nuts and washers. Corey plays the washers, and he's playing against the nuts. He's fighting his own sanity. Just iconic to the episode to me. What do you got, Idol?
I give kudos to the intro because it sets out this scene. You don't know, we don't like until we meet, like until about 5 minutes in, you don't know it's an asteroid. So he literally describes it as this vast, infinite plain, this desert that stretches from horizon to horizon. In my head, when I was watching, I was thinking like, hey, is this some kind of ethereal plane that doesn't end? Is this like a flat world Minecraft world that just like has nothing, no borders, no edges, just like completely? And that was and this one man trapped on there in this world. I was like, hey, I'm hooked. I want to know where this story is going. I want to know what this world is, what's happening here. And I know they're not going to explain it, and they did. Eventually it was just an asteroid, but I loved that they didn't describe it as an asteroid in the start and described it as how it felt to the character. To him, it feels like this infinite expanse of space that he's trapped on, that he might as well be in, like, another plane of existence, and there's no escape. Like, this is his lonely isolation. It's isolation in the infinity, which was it, that really captured me. I really liked that opening description. How about you, Walter?
I think you'll be happy then, because in a lot of episodes, the setting doesn't matter. Like, you're just buried in MacGuffins, but you're watching the characters, and you're watching, waiting for the twist. And they usually, well, I wouldn't say usually, a lot of times they just deliver that so well, it doesn't matter where it's set. So I'm glad that you enjoy that, because that's not something I would ever think about. My bread of the episode. Yeah, your reaction to Allenby shooting her, I enjoyed watching the reaction. Mine happened a little bit earlier, where Alicia's out of the box. They're talking for a few minutes. They wander outside. He grabs her by her arm and throws her to the ground. And, because we love data and we're surrounded by AI and our adjustment to that, my gut reaction was, don't treat a person that way. It's not a robot, a robot. Don't treat her like that. And then we get this great shot on the ground, her crying on one side, the car, which he makes the analogy to, on the other side, and he's trying to figure out, is she closer to a car or a woman? And so just that shot and my gut reaction to him treating her that way is what will stick in my head.
Interesting. Okay, let's go to our next fun segment. This is your last 5 minutes.
Well, if that's the best they could do, this should last about 5 minutes.
5 minutes. We will retrace our steps and figure out what's going on.
You've got 5 minutes. Do it.
Working theories are fine, Jordy, but we need a working solution in about 5 minutes.
We need another 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay, so Otto, describe what is...
I probably should have trimmed that down. I don't know why I did like
15 copyright notices.
I like that. No, I like that it's just nothing but 5 minutes.
The original clip was 5 minutes long, but I forced him to cut it down. No. Otto, explain this section, please.
Twilight Zone is famous for the twist at the end of the episode, and they don't all do it, but a lot of them do it. So I thought it would be fun, gentlemen. Go ahead and rewrite the last 5 minutes of this episode. Could you make it punchier? Could you make it more poignant? Could you make it make sense to what you like to do? Let's go reverse order. Idle. What is your last 5 minutes?
I kind of had my last 5 minutes as we were watching this, because I was kind of running theories all the way through. But my theory is, what if Alicia was actually human all along? Like, what if when Allensby shoots the trigger and he doesn't realise, he thinks she's a robot, but by some bizarre twist of fate, turns out, bam, she's Pinocchio'd into existence, or she's human. Don't need to explain it, but she is human. He actually ends up killing her.
You could easily just do it by, like, you pan up, and instead of seeing the robot face, you just see a single bullet hole.
The blood, yeah, or just the
blood
on the floor. Yeah.
I don't think they would show that on TV.
No,
but
that would not in
if
the
they
census,
showed
but
blood, even blood.
Yeah, maybe you get away with blood, but it's our 5 minutes. We can do what we want.
Yeah. So, but yeah, no. It turns out,
I have some gruesome ones lined up, because I actually did these ahead of time. So,
yeah, no, I definitely sort of portray her as a human. Or the other one I was thinking as well in Claiming 2 is actually the likeness of Alicia turns out to be the victim that he killed in self-defense, or the wife of the victim, and it's actually his guilt playing with him the whole way through. And that something I was toying with the idea, but I like the idea that actually he's been shipped a human being, and she's pretending, or at least he's trying to envision her as a robot in order to sort of deflect his guilt about his crime, or something, something along those lines. That's what I do. My 5 minutes.
All right, who is next in the order? I think Dan. You're up.
It would be me.
Yeah.
Yep. So one thing that is very well established in the episode is that Allenby cares for Corey. He has in the past brought him novels. We see a stack of them on his nightstand, his barrel that he uses as a nightstand next to his little cot. And whether or not we can treat Corey as an unreliable narrator, and we don't know what was in the box, truly, honestly, we do know that Allenby brought something special for him. And so the end of my episode would be at the showdown when Allenby pulls a gun and is about to shoot Alicia. Corey attempts to save her. And in doing so, there's a series of events that leads to Allenby being either wounded or killed. So now Corey does become either guilty of manslaughter or a murderer, whether or not before we knew, now we know for sure that he's capable of harming another human being. So that's the point at which he surrenders his sanity And now with the other men retreating and either bringing a wounded or dead Allenby back to the ship to blast off, presumably forever, now he's left to live out his days with Alicia on an asteroid where no supplies are coming, and he's chosen to surrender.
Yeah, that's an easy. I was going to pick a variation of that.
I think we're all kind of thinking through then the steps, like what follows after that. Would he kill the other two crew members to cover his crime? But then how could he ever escape? And
yeah, because my other thought was like, what if he just like kills the other two crew members and then like pulls Alicia to the rocket and tries to make an escape? That's an easy one.
We are so bloody already.
Oh yeah, well, it's the nature of the violent episode. I'm trying to think now of what would be a decent remix on what we already see. I feel like I would have liked to have gone earlier because now I've all the good ones have been taken almost. But you know what? I'll go with a more intense macro level one. It was all a fucking lie and a psychological experiment, and it turns out that it's all just a research thing of like how far can you push someone before they will start to fall in love with obviously fake things.
Kind of Truman
like
Show.
Yeah, a little bit of Truman Show like twist where it's like he throws himself in front of the thing, it goes bang, but then like a little pop thing goes out and it's like a little toy gun. It's like, well, no, experiment's over, and he's like, what? And then turns out that Alicia's just an actor and all. Yeah, that's my pick for it. It's all obviously fake, and they've decided that they're a nightmare dystopia acting out a fucked up research experiment. There you go.
He's afraid of temperatures that go below 130 Fahrenheit. So he can't get to the border. He can't go over the mountain.
There is an episode, not one that we're going to watch, but where he lives out some kind of story, and then at the end they show him he's inside this box, and the U.S. Air Force is experimenting on his mind, and so yeah. All right, so my last five, Corey comes to love Alicia, which, we already saw a little bit of. And they show a scene or two of them. They're making a home together. Alicia starts, working in a vegetable garden. It's important to have supplies on the asteroid. So Allenby returns and tells him, all right, the courts have granted your freedom, but the cost of these visits is off the books. This is the last time we'll be here. We don't have the spare weight, just like in the original. You've got to make a choice. Either come now or we'll never return. He decides to stay with Alicia, Corey does, because he loves her at this point. They have a life together. And you see the little ship, they'll reverse the footage, it'll blast off. Minutes later, she trips and falls over a ravine to her doom, and he's stuck alone on this asteroid then with no hope of return.
That's kind of where I thought it was going. I thought he was going to make the choice and say, no, actually, I found my happiness. This is where I'm going to stay.
Which, hypothetical for you guys, if he had stayed with her, a robot, would that have been happily ever after, or would it have been kind of tragic because it is a man alone?
I don't know.
I mean, I feel like it depends on like, because like the stargazing scene makes you question, okay, what degree of a real robot, real human being, how real is this woman? Whereas, like, I feel like if you didn't have the bit where, like, she's, like, speaking in that robot voice even before she's shot, you would, I feel like that makes it more obvious that Corey's going insane, and that makes it more tragic. But if you didn't have that, then it would be a happy ending. I feel like that's my bearing on it.
That's the best possible ending, is the Schadenfreude, where it does seem like on every note that they hit, that it's a happy ending. He gets to go back under the tree, watch another moonset, moonrise with Alicia in his arms, but as a viewer that it's a death sentence.
Yeah, I like that one.
He's happy in his own dementia, but there's nothing at the end of that for him.
Happiness is a construct anyways. Who cares?
We're all laughing through our psychosis.
My happily ever after is reviewing Twilight Zone episodes with you guys. So. Even though I'm going crazy in my mind.
May you never wake up. Fun fact, we had a Taz, the animated series, debut, a cameo here. Ted Knight, who was played Carter Winston in The Survivor. He made the uncredited appearance as Captain Allenby's crew member Adams, so he was there. If you remember The Survivor being that also an episode about someone falling in love with somebody else that wasn't quite human. And
he looks exactly as he did like 20 years later on Mary Tyler Moore Show. Just very, very Ted Knight-ular. It's when you see him, you know it.
Ted Knight. Ted Knight feels like he's like, I know, maybe I just got Knight Rider in my head. It feels like you should get into a jet black car and go off solving crimes. Anyway.
Ted Knight Rider.
Ted Knight Rider. Right, let's go on to ratings.
I can show you my rating code.
Schiller rating 3.5. Associational rating norm -3. That's much too low a rating.
I'm just not accustomed to seeing an unsatisfactory rating on a member of my crew.
Mind your own business. For your information, I have a very high efficiency rating.
Ensign, I will not have you address me in that tone of voice.
What do you want? Violins?
So with the violins, we have our rating criteria. One of us I'm used to going over to stars, but apparently I have a say in this now. So I do have a criteria or entry to submit to the quorum, if that is allowed. I would like to give this how many...
Idle, you kick us off, and you'll have to alternate with Dan then in
Okay, all right, okay, we'll do it that way. In which case, I'm actually going to steal a line from Dan's playbook and say how many Corey and the Quarries is out of 10 is this episode.
Right on.
Let's go with you, Otto. This is your idea. You can start.
I did not pre-rate this because it was pretty fresh in my mind. Just in terms of an episode, I think it started a little bit slow for me, but that didn't last very long. And I like episodes that make me question how I would feel if I were that person. And as soon as Alicia comes out of the box, I'm like, all right, how would I treat this person, this robot? It was a solid episode. It's not my favorite episode, but I think I told you the reason I picked it is because it is a classic Star Trek sci-fi plot that you could put in with any different characters, and that modularity is a point in its favor. I did not like the ending. I mean, I think we all came up with better endings than what the show did, where it's like, oh yeah, you're right, it's just a machine.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which I guess is like an era thing. So, I think we'll all have high ratings over the course of this thing, because I did try to pick some of my favorites and the best. So I'm going to give this one a 7.8.
7.8.
I think is hopefully actually is be on the low end of what we rate these going forward.
Interesting. Go Stars.
Oh, I'm sorry, 7.8. Corey's in the Quarry.
Yeah. For me, I'm actually going to go ahead and give this 9 Corys in the Quarry. And guess what? I imagine it might be a little bit high just because, like, it's the first episode. I have no frame reference, but I actually view that ending very differently. Like, you see it as like a product of the time of, it's just a machine, and you think it's a limp ending. I don't see it that way at all. I see it that as being very open to interpretation, and in case of the way the actor delivers that line leaves it so that you're wondering, did Alan B commit a crime just like Idle mentioned, or is it a case of like, is he or was it, maybe it was Dan, I think. And it leaves it way more open to a thought of, okay, what has just been, what is this a mercy? Is this a crime? Is this both? And I feel like that elevates the ending from beyond just a straightforward, and it's done now. I feel like it's a lot more sort of nebulous as to who won here, but I think it's obvious who lost. So I'm giving it a 9.
9. Okay, Dan.
I'll stand on 8. So I really appreciate it. One person we didn't talk about yet is the lead actor. We'll call him a protagonist, but Jack Warden. I see an Emmy Award win, an Oscar nomination. So really does a fine job of expressing the claustrophobia in his environment. And the problem I have though is some of the supporting cast just doesn't get as much of time to shine, and that may be because there's so much time spent, as Otto had mentioned in the top of the episode, establishing that it just kind of sucks the air out of the human interactions when they finally come along. This episode certainly pulled punches at the end, and despite that, the big things I'm taking away from this is that it kept me asking questions, questioning the nature of the characters' motivations, of the truth behind what's presented to us that we see, incorporates science elements. Everything about this has all the right parts, and there's a little bit of room for them to grow. But what a fantastic first outing for the first season of Twilight Zone.
No, definitely. I'm gonna go with an 8.5. I thoroughly enjoyed this. Like, I wasn't expecting.
You got to respect the system. 8.5 Corys.
Oh, sorry, 8.5 Corys in the Quarry.
Yeah.
Corey's in the house. No, 8.5 Corey's in the Quarry. I think I was trying to think. Like I've said, I pretty much agree with all the positives of this episode that we've described. I think like my only negatives would be like the two ancillary crew members that were just dicks for no real reason. Maybe them just to show that that's the Earth attitude, but there was just kind of like, you know, they could just be one of those guys, or maybe describe that a certain different way. And yeah, the ending was a bit sudden, and like Allensby suddenly going from like, we have no time, shoot this woman, or shoot this woman, shoot this robot, and like. There is some character isolation there, but I thought maybe, you know, we're stretched for time, they're stretched for time, so let's just wrap this episode up. We're done. Like we've handled the emotional part. Let's just go and get them out of here and do the twist. I kind of felt that a little bit rushed, but really thoroughly enjoyed this. And like you say, Stars, like this might just be like, it's the first Twilight Zone episode I've ever watched, so maybe I'm wowed, and maybe I'm setting the bar too high. But I expect there'll be some stuff I'm not so keen on. But no, I thoroughly enjoyed that. I love a good like thinker.
I think the crew members were there to balance out Allenby's reaction, because you don't know if he's guilty or if he's innocent or somewhere in between, and I think their kind of interplay helps balance that.
Yeah.
All right. They stripped their ship down to nuts and bolts, like they can only afford 15 pounds. They shipped them an entire 2,000-pound car out there on the asteroid. What? Like a piece at a time? How many trips would they have had to make?
They did say they'd been picking up other other sort of like
they picked up
from
8 other
colonies.
people. Yeah.
And they wouldn't be
So
coming
that's
back
like
this
half
way.
a car.
Yeah, that's another thing that's unspoken is what exactly led to the pardon, and it seems like they have this type of punishment may have been just revoked, and now it's cruel and unusual, and now they're just taking all the people on these asteroids and bringing them back.
Yeah.
Also,
who knows what's ahead of them?
Yeah. Why does he have a car? Like just randomly has a
He
car.
needed something to create.
Did he build it from scratch?
It's driving the point home about his complete freedom and agency despite still being trapped.
Yeah, that's true, I suppose. Well, out of total, we've given this an 8.3, strong showing from our...
You love your spreadsheets.
I do love a spreadsheet. I had to very quickly whip one up in the middle of that. 8.3 we've given this, which is a strong showing from the first episode. But please, I don't... What kind of release schedule? We're going to have some sort of release schedule for this, but we'll have it our next episode. What are we covering next? We are covering The Hitchhiker on the next episode of The Twilight Zone. Is that enough Vincent Price for you? No. Does he do it? Does Vincent Price ever on the Twilight Zone? No. Okay, he should be. Anyway, join us next time.
It's an American show, isn't it? I wouldn't have thought so, no.
No, okay, maybe not. Anyway, see you next time. Let's get spooky. Bye.